There's segregation between the Israelis and Palestinians, to be sure. No one can deny this, but Israel is not solely to blame. And segregation and separation is not enough to be labeled apartheid. Mahmoud Abbas, president of the Palestinian Authority, has said, "I will never allow a single Israeli to live among us on Palestinian land." And he's considered a moderate on the situation, a leader. There is a far-right religious element in Israel, as there is in America, as there is in Palestine, as there is in almost every country in the world. And they do have power. They're able to move forward and do things that parts of the general Israeli public disagree with. It does not reflect general Israeli interest, and many Israelis also hope for an end to the occupation themselves in due time. But so long as there is that threat that I previously mentioned that my opponent has not denied, that cannot be denied, you can't have an end to the conflict. You can't. Peace is something that is only achievable with people who understand each other on a basic level and ultimately know that they can't get along in the long term, but can still maintain friendly relations. This is possible. It's not possible with groups in power that advocate the death and destruction of their opponents, and that can't be dismissed. It is part of the Hamas Charter, and if it was something to be flippant and dismissive about, then why doesn't Hamas simply get rid of it? Clearly it means something to them. Clearly it's part of the way they do politics, and it is. You can look at videos on YouTube and see the way Hamas indoctrinates children. You can see the way Hamas attempts to manipulate the media. You can see the way they operate, and they are a political force and a terrorist group. They are a terrorist group that managed to get elected politically, and that is part of the problem. The fact that they were able to get elected. Part of the reason for Ariel Sharon's removal of the Israeli settlers from Gaza, part of it probably was because it may not have been economically feasible, but overall, the settlers who lived in Gaza also felt they had a right to live there just as much as some of the Jews in Hebron do. The whole region is not completely closed off to any one group, and it is now in Gaza. You can't really be a Jew in Gaza and have a free and open life. It's not possible. It's that kind of scenario of being a Jew in Gaza that is the ultimate problem. You can be a Palestinian in Israel and have ultimately greater rights than you could as a Jew in Gaza. And that is part of the problem. We may be tempted to make links, and it is our natural tendency to want to understand things in the context of others. But the apartheid analogy does not do any credit or help out any movement in the direction towards peace. With delicate situations like this, they are counterproductive. You must begin thinking about this situation as something that has no parallel to any other moment in time of history, because it doesn't, and it's too complicated to do so. When there is peace, I cannot tell you what it will look like, but I can tell you what it will feel like. Both sides will feel wronged and will breathe in the street and protest around the world. Extremists on both sides will say that their leaders have sold them out and that they will vow to carry on the struggle. But by then, the mentality will have to be to exclude these people from the conversation. They will not be allowed to participate at that point. And a reasonable solution will have to be reached in which both sides recognize that they did not get entirely what they want, but people don't have to die in the way they are. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions from the audience, and I will address them as soon as I can focus my eyes. I'll try to read the ones that you are legible. I'll try to get to it. If it's illegible, I will do my best. The first question is actually addressed to Alex. Okay? Says, you keep talking about the oppression of Jews as justification for Israeli apartheid regime, but why does anti-Semitism justify displacement of Palestinians and Islamophobia? One type of oppression should justify another type of oppression. Shouldn't, justify another type of oppression.
No, of course not, but I don't think that's what's happening either. I don't think this is ultimately about religion or race. It's a conflict between two nationalist groups, as my opponent said. Anti-Semitism is not the reason Israel ever gives for expansion into the West Bank or settlements. That's not the final thing set on the official policy. It's not Islamophobia either. I mean, the Jews also have live amongst Bedouins, the Druze. There's Arab communities within Israel itself that have always lived there and have continued to live there in a very specific set of life that almost that many other Muslim countries have oppressed themselves. The situation with the Palestinians is not exclusively Israel's fault either. Many of the neighboring Arab countries have policies that are just as hypocritical, but they condemn Israel for its actions while treating the Palestinians just as bad or worse than Israel.
Sure, I'll be really quick. First of all, it's definitely true that Israel is not the only one at fault for the condition of the Palestinians. I mean, Egypt, under Mubarak especially, I mean, we'll see what happens, but I don't think much is going to, choked off Gaza on behalf of Israel. The situation of the Palestinians in Lebanon has been horrendous for 40 years. The regime of Jordan massacred Palestinians in 1970. Syria did the same thing, I believe, 2 years later. But Israel, Jordan, Syria, Egypt, none of these countries created the refugee problem. The refugee problem was created by the Zionist movement, by something called Plan Dalet, actually drawn up by David Ben-Gurion, to ethnically cleanse most of Palestine and make it, make it exploitable by Jews, the land. So the Arab communities that have lived there and always will, I don't know if always will, can be said, but the Arab communities that have lived there in Israel are the ones that didn't get expelled in 1947 and 48. And the vast majority of them did. Like I said, there were up to 850,000 refugees and 200,000 Palestinians left in Israel after 48.
The next question is from Nate. If the goal is peace and equality, how does qualify Israel as an apartheid state help?
It helps because we're being honest by calling this out and showing it for what it is. The South African example, although, like I said, my case is built more on the UN definition, but the South African example is instructive as well because this was a country that had a system that was extremely similar to what's happening in Israel and Palestine now, and was able to transition peacefully to a democracy with equality for all, one person, one vote. In one of in the last part of his rebuttal, my opponent said basically that the security threat is always there, and you have to acknowledge it. I mean, that's true. But white South Africans face a security threat too. The ANC had a military wing. They were constantly doing attacks. It was extremely vicious. You can read about it. And yet, de Klerk with Mandela and others were still able to transition peacefully to a democracy. So it doesn't need to be constant conflict. I'm sure my opponent and I agree on that.
I don't think it warrants a comparison of the South African situation with regards to violence and Palestinians. And like I've said before, they're two completely different situations, and the violence is inspired by different mentalities, different motivations. You cannot make a comparison of apartheid without changing the definition of apartheid. not an accurate definition, it's not conducive to peace, and it does not make dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian issue on an equal footing, which is what needs to be done.
This question is addressed